this is why I cover foreign policy, which I believe is extremely important, especially if you're part of disenfranchised communities, poor, because we are the victims of empire. What they do overseas is a glorified beta test about what's going to happen domestically. And I had Nkosi Mandela on. I had the Palestinian Community Network on. There have been longstanding tradition of solidarity between African Americans, Afro Brazilians, South Africans, and Palestinians because the oppression that we face is very similar. In fact, you had NYPD, you had LAPD train with Israeli soldiers, and they exchange tactics all the time. You want to know what tactic that they learned from Israel? Or maybe they learn from each other. It's very hard to pinpoint who started first because it's the question who started Nazism. The Nazis are Americans who genocided the Indians because Nazis learned from Americans who genocided it. So that's the question. But let's keep it simple. Let's say Israel and the United States share these tactics where you're a Palestinian and you are resisting the United States sponsored, UK sponsored, state sponsored genocide and apartheid of people that you had the right to resist, they label those people as terrorists. God forbid you pick up a pebble and throw it. If you do, you're a terrorist, and Israel is allowed to do whatever they want to you.
And that was all in the works, and that's what I was talking about when Barack Obama repealed habeas corpus and said they could just all they have to do is say you're a terrorist. So that's why it's Standing Rock. Even Amy Goodman was charged with terrorism just for covering it, right, and stuff like that. So that's the new thing. They just say you're an environmental terrorist. Right. And so now those people supporting the truckers in Canada, they're economic terrorists. That's what they're saying about these people in Cop City. And so nobody stood up when they did it to the truckers. And so, of course, they're doing it here. And, they learned it from the Israelis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the connection that we bring. Nkosi Mandela, the grandson of Nelson Mandela, acknowledged the genocide and apartheid as Black Americans are going through in the United States on our show. The same way we acknowledge the Palestinians. It's a similar trend once you follow international news, the Western world order, the violence that they commit. That's why the liberal and social democrat strategy of pacifism, of fighting against fascism, is not going to work. It's not going to work. I'm sorry, because I'm going to show you guys what they engaged on us. There's just one example. I need to speed this up because we got a lot to cover. Atlanta police arrest organizers of bail fund for Cop City protesters. Now, I could make an argument, I'm sure a lawyer can probably do it better than me, that this is a direct violation of the First Amendment. Like, isn't the ability, going by their logic, the ability to raise bail funds a form of speech? You speaking out against the police and their actions? That's the logic they use to when they say that speech is money is as a person regarding the Supreme Court. Go ahead, Jimmy, if you want to chime in.
Well, of course it is. But I remember watching an episode of Boston Legal where William Shatner was talking to James Spader, and he was saying, well, it'll go to the Supreme Court, and the Constitution says this. And he said, William Shatner said, Constitution says whatever the fuck we want it to say. He goes, what do you mean?
Yes.
No, it's the Constitution. He goes, no, we give money to the people. They run for the office. They pick the people we want them. They put them on the court, and it says whatever we want to fucking say. That's how this works. And it was just such a truth. And so right now, of course, it's the First Amendment, but the Attorney General in Georgia and the governor in Georgia say these people are terrorists, and they're not gonna stop until they get all these people arrested who are raising money and a bail fund. That's what the governor and the Attorney General. So they say they determined that the First Amendment is what they fucking say it is in Georgia.
Exactly. Like George Carlin said, you got temporary allowances. They got that shit they write down in the books where they tell you that shit is PR. It's whatever they in the mood to give you. The second the Black Panther started arming up, Reagan was like, that Second Amendment, fuck that shit. Not with them, right?
Isn't it funny too how they make a big deal about when a Republican gets to choose a Supreme Court member as if As if a Democrat ever picked a champion of the working class in their
That's exactly what I
in my
said.
lifetime. That's why there's so many decisions, 8-1, fucking 9-1, all that shit. They all agree on most of this shit. They're all corporatists. They all are against the worker and the common man, and that's that. That's because of the Democrats and the Republicans. And the reason why we all know that Barack Obama tried to hold the Supreme Court nomination over people's heads so you'd vote for Hillary because she's so fucking repulsive. They knew nobody would otherwise, and it still didn't work, and they lost it. And as soon as they lost that Supreme Court seat, a bunch of Democratic senators said, "Yeah, we should have fought for more harder, and we didn't because we made a miscalculation." But there's a lot of people who make you think that the reason why the Supreme Court is the way it is because Jimmy Dore.
That's so ridiculous, and that's and they will be upset with me because my very simple answer to the obvious Democratic strategy of using the Supreme Court to guilt people to voting for these war criminals was I don't trust you with a Supreme Court pick either. So what I mean by that is Joe Biden said he would veto Medicare for all.
That's
So
right.
if Joe Biden would veto Medicare for all, what makes you think he wouldn't put a judge on there that would label it unconstitutional? Like these are things that dumb leftists don't think about. Like you had Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the darling liberal judge who used the doctrine of discovery to rule against Indian gas pipeline protesters. Do you guys want to know the precedent the doctrine of discovery was created under? When Americans were seizing the lands of indigenous people and committing genocide against them, and then the old Americans that were committing genocide against the indigenous people or our nation said that we have the right to do that under the doctrine of discovery. We're discovering new lands, so anyone who occupied that land, we have the right to do whatever we want to them. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that corporations under the doctrine of discovery have the right to drill on indigenous lands. That's the liberal judges that you guys want us to vote for. Fuck out of here.
And
Anyway,
that's what people had woken up to. I thought at least half of the people who voted in the Democratic primary in 2016, I thought they had woken up to this fact. And now it's like they all have fucking amnesia. Nobody remembers anything that happened in 2016 and how the establishment rigged it against us and silenced our voices and kept going doing why would they want. Everybody forgot because Trump. And now they all pretend they're fighting some existential threat instead of a game show host, which is what they're actually fighting.
Man, I'm not looking forward to another Trump term, which I think is going to happen. It really dumbed down. It really broke the brains of so many people. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm gonna get through the story real quick, and then we get to the Max Blumenthal more fun story.
Can I just say, I felt that way too. I thought for the good of the country, I wish Trump would go away so they couldn't use him to distract us from what the mission we were on before as progressives. But now I just saw a clip, and I'm going to cover it on Monday, where MSNBC host is saying DeSantis is way worse than Trump. So they're going to create another monster, and it's all about white supremacy and all about it's just the scariest buzzwords they can use. Rachel Maddow just that speech. We're going to talk about it right now, right?
Yeah, that'll be our next story. Yeah.
That was all about trying to scare people about Nazis in America. But go ahead. Not the Nazis we're funding.
Yeah, I'll wrap this story up.
Not the ones we're funding.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. I appreciate your time, Jim. I'll wrap this story up real quick. I'll just on a few more receipts I'll read just on the wrap stop of Cop City story. This from Defend Atlanta Flores. The movement to stop Cop City is a popular movement, and the tactics it uses are also popular. When the government attacks us, it relies on more and more general and vague accusations to do so, thus pulling more and more people into a movement. This pattern cannot be stopped. And this also shows the Atlanta police and the fascists that support it are panicking over organized resistance. Look at this audio release. Atlanta Police Department discusses how the latest arrest of the Atlanta, let me see what the official name, the Atlanta Solidarity Fund organizers are part of a deliberate campaign targeting the Stop Cop City movement. So the police are actively going after people who they deem to be a threat against Cop City. This is the kind of stuff that they're doing in this country. This is not, and I repeat, this is not Soviet Russia. This is not the DPRK. This is not China. This is footage of the American police pulling up to organizers, fully armed, like they were going against a school shooter. And the last point I want to make on this story before we move on to the next one, I want you guys to understand why they are doing this and why, no matter how bad it looks, that's why it looks bad, but no matter how bad it looks, they must do this. Because if they lose this fight against the activists fighting against Cop City, can you imagine the trickle effect that will have? It will embolden a national and possibly an international anti-police movement. So they have to squash this shit right now. You can't give any inch to the proletariat. If you want to build Cop City, you build Cop City. If you allow them to stop you, that will create an energy where people are like, oh shit, let's fight against the police some more. Let's fight against fascists some more. That's why they must crack down on this right now. So before we move on, let's get last thoughts and we move on to our last segment.
By the way, where is Black Lives Matter? Tell me Black Lives Matter wasn't a fucking half of it wasn't an FBI psyop.
I'm glad you brought that up because Ferguson protesters, who was original Black Lives Matter activists, they was killed. And this is widely reported. They was killed, and the real activist was replaced. There was banned. It was shunned by liberal activists who co-opted the movement. Black Agenda Report does a great report over this, where you had the more radical activists, organizers, doing the right thing, and you had liberal Democrats infiltrate the organization, and then they condemned the more radical activists. They used woke language to condemn radical activists, get them out of the movement. Then the Democratic Party took them over. They took millions of dollars of bribes. They got mansions. All of a sudden, they endorsing Jim Crow Joe. The Black Lives Matter organization is trash. I want you guys to understand. I was at the George Floyd protest. The people involved are real. They really want to fight fascism. Right. They're the same people. I know you understand this as well. They're the same people fighting against Cop City. But that movement was hijacked by the Democratic Party, which is why RBN, we say, if you create a movement and it goes to the Democratic Party in any way, your movement will die. So that might be Black Lives Matter. Go ahead, Jimmy. If you
she said that. Well, I mean, she said it on my show in 2017 that the road for progressives inside the Democratic Party leads to a graveyard. And that is, how many more times this has to be proven over and over and over again? For fuck's sake, man. I mean, we didn't just go a little bit to the right. We went unbelievably to the right with Joe Biden. Unbelievably. I mean, we can't even get a goddamn minimum wage. If there was a Republican, we've had a better chance of getting that fucking passed on a negotiation than with it. And by the way, it's so funny to see Kevin McCarthy and Joe Biden
pretending.
It's so funny to see them doing a negotiation. They both work for the exact same motherfuckers. Most motherfuckers know what's going to happen. They know what the parameters of the debate are going to be, and that's that. It's just,
Jesus. And I don't even CJ, I'll pass to you for your last thoughts on this subject. But I promise God, I do not use the term fascism lightly.
Right.
I am not one of those people that do that. But what else do I just use to describe this? What else do you use, Jimmy, to describe this mindset? And it was the last thing I had on this segment. We have fascists.
Where the fuck is Chomsky? Where the fuck is Chomsky on the truckers when they did that shit to the truckers? And then where are the people who are supposed to be leaders on this shit? Where are the artists? Where are the fucking musicians? Where are the people like Chomsky? Where the fuck are they? They're nowhere, and it falls on the shoulders of assholes like us to fucking talk about this shit.
Yeah,
and then they call it right wingers for doing it. It's fucking crazy. Yep. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
And they'll still never no one will ever make Chomsky apologize for calling fucking Medicare for all candy and the people fighting for it in the middle of a fucking pandemic, children. They'll never make him apologize for saying that the unvaccinated who didn't want to fucking go along with a bullshit program that we now know was nothing but a big lie, and saying that they should be quarantined from society. And when asked how they should get food and water, he said that's up to them. That's their problem. He's never come out and fucking said, you know what, I was wrong about that, and guys like Jimmy Dore was right about that. He won't fucking do that because it turns out he has just a little character as the people he's been critiquing his whole life. And as soon as it fucking came time to rely on your values, you rely on your values of bodily autonomy and my body, my choice, and being skeptical of government, and when corporations come together and have fucking medical mandates that don't have anything to do with the Nuremberg Code because it's not informed consent because they lied about. Those are the fuckers that are supposed to have a sense of history and stand up against that shit, and they fucking did it. So these just as bad as anybody when the fucking rubber meets the road. Chomsky fucking bent to the Nazis and he fucking went along with them, and he's not fucking trying to make up for it. And nobody's ever going to hold his feet to the fire to do that, just like no one's going to hold AOC's feet to the fire or Bernie Sanders to the feet to the fire. And they'll never come on fucking media like this because they're all cowards who serve the fucking machine. Every 4 years, Chomsky shits his pants and tells you got to vote Democrat. That fucking guy is useless now.
The professional managerial class never faced consequences for their horrific political opinions. You can be a member of the professional managerial class and advocate literal fascism like Chomsky and many of the NATO left did, and they were still treated with dignity and respect among the PMC class. But God forbid us ordinary people have a bad tweet we sent out 3 years ago. You're done.
Yep.
Different standards, right? So I'm gonna read this last part. I'm gonna show you guys the fascism walking among us. We still have the Max Blumenthal story. That's a fun way to wrap this up. But these are the fascists that walk among us. This is some representative in Georgia. He said today's arrests are about the violence that occurred at the site of the future.
That's the Attorney General. That's Attorney General. Georgia.
AG. AG. Chris Carr. This is the Attorney General, guys.
What?
Not just some average random fucking person. The Attorney General. Thank you, Jimmy. But he said, as we said before, we will not rest until we held accountable every person who has funded, organized, or participated in this violence and intimidation. So they just labeled all protest violence and intimidation, and now they label everybody criminal for it. How that? Once again, Jimmy, I said we don't use I try not to use fascism like just nilly-willy or whatever, right? But what other language can you use to describe this other than fascism? The forcible oppression of your opposition. That's exactly what this is. Literally cracking down on dissent and protest. These are literally fascist sentiments, right? But I'll wrap this segment up.
Why isn't the Democratic Party establishment chiming in on? Where is Stacey Abrams? Like, remember, this is Georgia. Where is Hakeem Jeffries? Where is the Black Congressional Caucus? Go ahead, Jimmy.
They're busy funding a new police force to the tune of $2 billion. That's what there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I just don't understand these people. They claim to, and it was so disgusting about this. One of the most disgusting things I heard about Cop City is when they were trying to say this is to help the Black community. This is in honor of Martin Luther King or somebody like. It's like you have the audacity, and I don't know how else, because this encapsulates how much we're not a democracy. The people down there do not want this.
Yeah.
But they're saying you're going to take this and you're going to like it. They don't want this, and they're just proceeding along, just like with the debt ceiling and the whole PR firm, PR arm of the Democratic Party is selling this debt ceiling. It just, up is down, black is white. Everything is so haywire, and the NATO left is not helping. I'll let you. That's a good segue to the next story. The NATO left, and that's what I consider Rachel Maddow. Go ahead, Jimmy.
That video you showed of those cops dressed up in full military gear, that it looks exactly like what Mike Preisner said he used to do in Iraq, right? Remember, he used to say he used to go in there, drag people out of their houses and smash people's heads against the wall and make them bleed and fucking torture. That's what he was doing, right? And that's what they're doing that looked like a scene from Iraq. That didn't look like a scene from America. Those aren't cops. Cops are supposed to show up, right? Which are supposed to be civil servants. These guys look like they look like soldiers. So cops, the problem is they see the citizen as like an enemy that's supposed to be there, so they're supposed to police instead of a citizenry they're supposed to serve. And that's what soldiers are taught. Soldiers are occupying forces. Well, that's what cops are now, because none of the cops live in the goddamn neighborhoods that they police in the first fucking place, especially here in Los Angeles where I live. All the cops live out in in the mountains, no, literally, and then
like
they
far away,
and then they drive into the inner city and police them like they're fucking enemies instead of citizens that they're there to serve. And that's exactly what this is. And so exactly what Tulsi was the one who was actually saying that, what we do, our foreign policy is going to become our domestic policy. And then, of course, AOC said that at a Bernie's rally, and people pretended that it was her line. And so anyway, but this is living proof. It's exactly, and we're like the frog in the pot. and it's boiling, and no one's fucking noticing what's happening. And the only guy who's saying anything about it certainly isn't Bernie fucking Sanders. The only guy who's saying anything about it is RFK Jr., right? So I don't know if he's spoken out about stuff like this before, but he's certainly talking about how the corporation is crushing. First of all, how the controls our government, right? He's the only one talking about that anymore. Bernie Sanders used to at least a little bit talk about how the banks are controlled. So at least RFK Jr. is doing that. I would like to see what his opinion is on shit like this and how he reforms policing in America, because the militarized police like this is not policing. This is exactly what you said. And I don't use that term. Everybody wants to call anything they don't like fascism and grifting. It's just because they don't like it. But this is what, so when it actually happens, people don't notice it. They don't recognize it. Actual fascism, when Joe Biden and the Democrats crushed the railroad union strike. That's actual fascism. That's the government being controlled by tycoons and corporations to crush the workers, right? And so that's what fascism is. The government's supposed to be the buffer. They're supposed to be there to stand up for the workers and have, but so that's exactly what this is too. This isn't serving the public. This is controlling the public with a militarized police force. And that's exactly what fascism is. And so, yeah, we're living in it, and people embrace it, and they get people to think that more, because that's why they hype the crime in Chicago. Now, I don't know about you if you've ever been to Chicago, but it's 10 times cleaner than fucking New York City. And it's like walking around a mall, most of it, right? So just like there's poor neighborhoods where the crime is concentrated, just like everywhere now. And of course, they flood all the fucking cities with guns, and they take away all the fucking jobs, and they close the schools, which is what Rahm Emanuel did. What the fuck you think is going to happen in those neighborhoods, you asshole? But most of the cities, they have to make people think that it's scarier than it is so they can keep funding more fucking police. And now we have that new mayor in Chicago, and that guy's not going to do a goddamn fucking
he's a joke.
He's not, he has no plan. He has no vision. He's not going to use any of his political capital to try to actually do something big that helps people. He's going to try and be a fucking middle manager, micromanaging problems and trying to please everybody. He has no vision. He has no idea. And so there won't be anything happening. There won't be any ideas on how to fix anything coming out of the fucking Democratic Party.
Yeah, and we must say this part about Chicago too. Chicago, it has the highest funding, the second highest funding per capita for police. Yet their crime rate is this high. I just did a segment on this a couple of weeks ago. They are the second behind New York, spends the most per capita on police. Chicago's second. So this is not a funding issue. And it's funny because TYT covered it too when they interviewed the mayor that you're talking about, Jimmy. They interviewed him and they was asking him about crime, and Anna was like, "Hey, I don't know what's going on. We're funding over here, but crime rate is still up." And then no funding. She was trying to make the point, and she was making the point of defund the police without even knowing it in that segment. And I'll pass it back to you, Nick.
Yeah, Jimmy, let's talk. We can move on to our last fun story just for a second time. But Jimmy, last thoughts.
Well, just to wrap it up is that people don't realize that what the driver of crime is, and that more cops don't mean less crime, and cops don't stop. I called the cops. I had a crazy, when I lived in Pasadena, I had a crazy guy with a gun sitting in front of my house, and I called the cops. They didn't come for fucking 55 minutes, man. I mean, so now you know why people own guns, right? So because the cops don't come. And I'm anti-gun, but I certainly can't wag my finger at somebody who feels threatened. So anyway, I forget how I was wrapping it up, but that's it. It's wrapped up. And
we spent an hour having fun, spitting, exposing fascism internationally and domestically.